Hi everyone, this is Marina with How I Got Here, and today is a very special podcast. I have one of my closest friends, also business partner, Russell Greg Targoff, with me on a panel today, and we're going to interview. Hi, Russell. We're going to interview our dear friend that I recently met, and now I feel like you're part of the family already. Um, Richard Davis. You have an incredible story, and probably I personally never met anybody with a story like yours. And what you have done with your life to make a purpose out of what you have gone through is probably one of the most amazing and touching things I've ever heard in my life. So both of you, thank you very much for being here. Russell, thank you so much. This is the first time you're actually here, I'm assuming.
You. Thank you.
So, Rich Davis, I'm gonna start off that you have written a book. It's called, let me see if I could put it in the camera here. Um, Wait. I was not born an addict. Well, I'm gonna put the book in the, here we go. There we go. I was not born an addict. And this describes like most of your life, because I know you've written another book of your childhood and all your ordeals. Um, Today I would like for people to know who is Rich Davis behind the scenes, behind the book, the boy that you used to be. Um, what was life like growing up with everything that you have been through? And I don't want to say much about it. I want you to, talk about your life in general. Um, Tell me what it was like growing up and what caused for you to become an addict. So welcome.
All right. That's that's such a great question. And I have specific recall and and I have exactly what I was. I know exactly where in my formative years as a child, 3.5 to 4 years old. I know exactly what came into my life and shifted and changed who I was as a 3.5-year-old young boy.
Mm.
Um, I was the sixth child of eight. I was the youngest for 4 years. My mom had her eighth child 8 years later. Let me just tell you the reason behind the title of my book. I was not born an addict. And this is very significant to my belief system and how important I believe my coming into this world is and how important it is that I remember so much. Um, I gave it that title because in my world of recovery for the last 15 or 20 years, I don't want to skip ahead, but it's necessary. I'll get right back to where the beginning was.
Of
For
course.
the last 15 or 20 years, I've been hearing a lot of people at meetings qualify for 15 or 20 minutes at particular meetings. And they would begin their sharing with the meeting by saying, my name is such and such, and I'm an alcoholic or an addict. And I was born an addict. And that never resonated with me because the God that I believe in, I would believe that the God that anyone believes in has to be one of loving, compassion, mercy, nurturing, warmth. I would never think that God would bring any child into the world
Mm-hmm.
as an addict. Addiction is demonic. Addiction
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come through a mother's womb from God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there a physical, perhaps, way of coming in as an addicted child? Yes, physically, a mother being pregnant and addicted while her pregnancy is, while she's going through her pregnancy. But from the soul level, I was not born an addict. I was born to a wonderful woman who thought that I was going to change her world like the first five children that she had. I was born into an alcoholic home. My father was a compulsive gambler, alcoholic. My father was a domestically violent man, very irresponsible, didn't take care of the home life that he should have taken care of. He gambled all of his money away. He drank his money away, abusive to my mom. When I was born, there had already been five born before me. My brother, my oldest brother, was 11 years old. My oldest sister was 13 years old. I had a brother 9 years old. I had a sister uh, 5 years old, and I had a sister 3 years old. At 3.5 years old, um, that's when the chaos in my home began. My father was in Ossining State Prison, otherwise known as Sing Sing State Penitentiary, for armed robbery. When I was born, he was doing time for that armed robbery. I didn't meet my father until I was 3.5 years old, and I remember vividly looking out the fourth-story window of our projects in Gravesend Projects in Coney Island. I remember vividly looking out the window the day that he was released and came home. And my mother said, "That's your father down there." And my mother went down, and I watched my mother greet him and hug him. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I never connected with that man, never, ever. The first thing that happened, and this is very significant in the issues that I was I was led to confront in my recovery world, because recovery is not about the drug or the alcohol. Recovery is about the trauma. Recovery is about the, the ego development, the ways in which we protect ourselves growing up, protecting ourselves from the shame of a family like mine and the disgrace that my family felt as a result of my father's addictions. So that guy comes into our house at 3.5 years old. And the first thing that happened to me is I was shifted out of my mom's bedroom. I went from a 3.5-year-old child sleeping in my mom's room to now I was put in a room with two older brothers. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad thing because I fortunately, and this is another significant thing in my life in the formative years of a child, before my father came out, there was peace and order in our home. I got love and nurturing from five older siblings, particularly my two oldest, my sister Barbara and my brother Jim. My brother John was a little bit too young to invest any emotional nurturing in me. He was an athlete. He was younger, and he didn't have no time for me. But my older sister Kathy, who was 4 years older than me, um, at 5, 6, 7, she loved her little brother. You know, so I got nurturing and I got love and I saw peace in my home. There was no anxiety and stress. My mom was on welfare. My father was a veteran of World War II. My mom got an income, and it was enough in the projects to sustain us, with no pressure. The bills were paid, the electric was paid, the food was consistent, everything was consistent. Nobody in the projects back then, at least not my family, nobody knew we were poor. We didn't think that way. We had West 33rd Street I lived on. I was 200 yards south of the bay, and I was a quarter mile north of the ocean. Through my mom's fourth-story window facing the west, I had a view of the Narrows Inlet
Wow.
into the East River. A mile away from me stood the Statue of Liberty. I saw them build the Verrazano Bridge. This was the sight of a young child looking out those windows. There was peace in my home.
Right.
And we played on West 33rd Street. It was ethnic. It was blacks, whites, Hispanics, Jews,
Mm.
everything,
Right.
everything. And we were the only big building in that area. Now it's all built up, that
Mm.
area of Coney Island. So there was a normalcy to this. There was no pressure. There was no white, there was no black, there was no poor, there was no
Right.
rich. Everybody was on the same ground.
Right.
and it was fun.
Mhm.
It was fun. There was a little store across the street, Molly's
Mhm.
candy store, penny candy. We had Skelzy boxes chalked in the streets. The girls had their double Dutch boxes mapped out. We played with marbles. I remember putting my wax in my bottle caps for Skelzy. I had baseball cards. I flipped baseball cards. We played sports. I made milk box containers with 2x4s and my skates attached to the 2x4. I remember all these beautiful things. And I
Mhm.
remember the asphalt in our Gravesend Projects development, where I remember when it was freshly poured, the asphalt, every 3 or so years, they would put new asphalt. It made it better for us to skate.
Right,
And
right,
I had older brothers and sisters. I I hung out on their coattails.
right.
They were my fun. They were my support system. I wasn't afraid of anything, nothing. I remember my brother and sister coming home from wherever they were at school, whatever. My brother Jim and my sister Barbara, particularly, putting their hands out to me. I was the baby brother. I was the little kid running around. But at 3.5 years old, when my father came in, this is, of course, coming from my brother Jim, more than my recollection. My brother Jim said the best 3.5 years of the Davis family's life were the years that my father was in prison. Because when he came out, the energy shifted. And this is where the 3.5-year-old boy started being contaminated
Mhm.
with seeing the destruction of addiction. All of a sudden, the energy shifted. All of a sudden, within a year, year and a half,
Mhm.
uh, the food wasn't consistent. We were going without nourishment on a daily basis. You know, the milk containers were emptying out. We were eating
Mhm.
macaroni and cheese. You know, we were eating more sugar. Poor people eat sugar. They're brought up on cake, donuts, and
Yeah,
cookies, Yoo-hoo drinks, Coca-Cola, sugar-filled things. No
true.
nourishment, no vegetables, no broccoli, no corn, no things like that. No meat, macaroni and cheese, peanut butter and jelly. We used our glasses in the house were old peanut butter and jelly jars. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Things in my refrigerator were very scarce. What you saw most of the time was my father's Rango bottle. My father loved condiments. My father loved ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, Worcestershire sauce. He loved
Mhm.
all these things. I hated them as I grew older. I wouldn't put them near my mouth because of my father.
Memories, right?
I didn't know why for a long time. But again, the energy started shifting.
Of
And
course.
then the fights started happening. Then we were witnessing domestic violence, 4 or 5 years old. That's when I started feeling anxiety and fear for my mom, for my mom,
Mhm.
because he was abusive to my mom. That's when I heard them fighting over the welfare checks. You took my welfare check, you bum, you bastard, you son of a bitch. Your children have no food.
Right.
The children don't have clothing. And what happened as a result of that is as my brother got older, 14, 15, my sister got older, 16, 17, chaos started. All of a sudden, now my older sister's fighting with my mom because she's a daddy's girl and she's blaming mom for daddy's problem. And my older brother hates my father because he's blaming my father for my mother's problems.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're hating one another. They're fighting against one another. And I'm watching this chaos as a young boy.
Mm.
I'm watching my sister Kathy now go with my grandmother in Queens because it's too much for my mom. I'm watching my brother John, who now is going into junior high school, but they're not paying attention to his schooling. He's a tremendous athlete. He was in his uniform more than he was in his regular clothes, from the baseball field to the basketball court. Very athletic, very well known in the neighborhood. He's not getting any attention at school. Nobody's going to his games. He starts hitting the streets, getting in trouble. I'm watching it now. I'm 6 and 7 years old. I'm watching my mom go into a depression on the couch. She's not sending us to school because she's depressed.
Right.
And back then, doctors made house calls. My mom had a doctor come in at least once or twice a month. And what would he do? He'd prescribe her medication. And back then, the medication were barbiturates, Valium, Librium, Seconal, Tuinol, Nebutol, antidepressants. Well, guess what? The depression and the barbiturates put my mom more to sleep than anything else.
Mhm.
My mom was awake at night. My mom would come alive around 6, 7 o'clock at night. Most of us didn't go to school because she was half asleep during the day in a fog, not conscious of what's going on. My dad was at the track or at the bar, and we had no discipline. There was no reinforcement of education. Only one out of 8 of us, two, I'm sorry, went on yet later on in years to get an education. Nothing was reinforced, no discipline, no boundaries.
Mhm.
By 6 or 7 years old, I hated my father, wanted nothing to do with him. By 6 or 7 years old, I was spending more time at the welfare department with my mom, trying to get emergency checks for food and for rent.
Mm. Oh, wow.
At 7 years old, because of no discipline and because of no supervision, and because of no one protecting one another anymore. I was 7. My brother now, Jim, was 17, going on 18. He had left and joined the Navy. My sister Barbara had left and gotten married at 16 years old. Now all the people that I was relying on for security and safety, they're gone. And I'm left with two very dysfunctional parents who have now had their seventh and soon to be their eighth child. And the food was scarce, the clothing was scarce, the bill paying was not happening. Electric shut off, extension cords going into the next door neighbor's apartment to give us light, to give us heat, give us whatever we needed.
Mm.
And and this 7-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid now is just flying around on his own, not doing well, not knowing, hating my father, not wanting to be like him, frightened to death that my mother might die because of his abuse. I wanted nothing to do with him, and I wasn't intelligent enough to understand what needed to be done. But I went into this protective mode, and this is another thing that destroyed me uh, and led me to social pressure, peer pressure, and eventually sticking needles in my arms and drinking myself into oblivion. But at 7 years old, I was wandering in my building alone, going from downstairs upstairs, and I was sexually abused by a boy 10 years my senior.
Mm.
I still have his scent in my nose from what he did to me. And it was the first offense towards me that would stick in my psyche.
Mm.
And know, I didn't know how devastating it was or how it would be. I just knew something was wrong
Right.
about the act. And I know and remember feeling shamed. And I was threatened by him that if I told anyone that he would do something really horrible to me. So that I kept secret for many, many, many years. That was at around 7. The second trauma that happened to me personally. I was never afraid of my father for my own welfare, although I watched him chase my brother John with a pool stick and beat him over his back going across the beds in one of our bedrooms. I was never frightened of him for my own
Right.
safety, but he terrified me with his anger and his violence towards my mom.
Right.
That's where I saw the majority of his anger up until this point. Later, in my seventh year, he would collapse. He would collapse the emotional armor that I think God gives us to protect ourselves until we're old enough to understand what this thing called life has in
Mhm.
store for us. But I was downstairs on West 33rd Street on a Saturday morning. My mom, like all other moms in the early to mid 60s in projects, you woke up on Saturday morning, not like today. You didn't futz around, lay around in your bed.
Right.
You got up as soon as your eyes opened, your mother knew it, and your ass was out of that house in a half an hour,
Mhm.
down in the street playing. Get out of the house, go down. But the great thing about living in projects, especially at that time, this was the height of the baby boom. There were there were 30, 40 kids by 9 o'clock out on the street in the spring and summer on West 33rd Street. And there were men fishing along the bay
Right.
at that hour. There was action.
Mhm.
There was action, on the streets always. And this Saturday morning, I went down and there was a bunch of us, maybe 12, 13, 14 of us, and we were playing Brooklyn's favorite sport, stickball.
Mhm.
And I was on, at this particular time, I was on the offensive team waiting to bat. And what happened that morning is I had to go to the bathroom when I left the house, but so excited about being a kid, 7 going on 8 years old. I want to get down. I don't want to go to the bathroom. I still today at 71 years old don't like to stop to take a pee for God's sakes because I think I might miss something. But at 7, 8 years old, you want to get down to the street, the kids all ganging up, you want to get chosen in on the game. You need to go down and you don't pay attention to having to go, as my mom would say back then. You don't want to take a duty. You want to
Mhm.
go play ball first.
Right.
The duty can wait. I'm putting a little humor to this
Right.
because that's the mentality of that 7-year-old kid going down into the street.
Right.
Mom, don't bother me with that shit. I don't
Right.
I don't care about. I want to go down. And I went down. And as I remember vividly, waiting to get up at bat and the kid in front of me. And I wasn't getting any cooperation from my body. And I had to go to the bathroom bad, but I didn't want to drop the bat and go. And all of a sudden, my stomach just went haywire on me. And I knew I better get upstairs.
Mhm.
And again, this is a Saturday morning. And our doors in the projects were never locked.
Right.
People knew everybody in the projects back then. Nobody locked their doors. You walked out of my project on the fourth floor, apartment 4E, you smelled what was being cooked
Right.
down at the end of your hall. You had ethnicity all over those halls in
Right.
the projects back then. So I dropped my bat because I knew I had to go. And I knew I was pressing my luck. I knew it. And I dropped my bat and I ran to my front door of my building, which was about, at that time, maybe 50, 60 yards away. And I dashed in, hit that door at my shoulder. I ran to the stairwell. I ran up those steps. I think it was 8 flights. And I opened that door and I expected my door to be open. And I ran to it and simultaneously grabbed the knob, turned it, and I hit it with my shoulder.
Mm,
Boom, and I bounced off it. The door was locked,
mm,
which took me some years to understand why it was locked. Apparently, my mom and dad were having sex.
mhm,
That's what happened. I know it. And I've had to put these pieces together as a sobering man going through therapy and, and sifting through all of this stuff.
mhm,
Well, I was banging on the door, yelling out, Ma, Ma, please open the door, Ma, banging.
mm,
And that door opened finally after probably 30 or 40 seconds.
mm,
But it wasn't in time for me. I'm going to cry. This is a tough one for me. It wasn't in time. It wasn't time enough for me not to make in my pants, and I made my pants.
mm,
And I'm a parent, and this is probably what really, really makes me get emotional because I can't fathom. I can't even imagine the reaction that I got ever coming to a parent's mind.
mhm,
And that door opened, and there was my 6 foot father. I looked up, he looked like a giant. And he grabbed me and pulled me into that apartment and stripped my clothes off me and beat me from the very front of that apartment. It was a
Hallway.
railroad apartment. And he beat me all the way down to the hall, to the end, and then dragged me back with no clothes. And then he threw me back out in the hallway. And I was a mess, terrified, horrified. And I was I was in shock. But what I did was I went into the hall, into the stairwell, because I was exposed to the whole floor,
Right.
and people were opening doors. So I went and I sat in the stairwell, and my mom didn't come out for probably a minute, which seemed like an eternity. And then she came out with a blanket, wrapped the blanket around me. She was very upset. And then she walked me back in, cleaned me up, and put me in my room. And nothing was ever said about it ever again after that. So this is where my father, my father turned into something of a monster.
Mhm,
And I would never, ever, ever trust him again for all the years that I lived. And I never thought about forgiveness because I just shut down emotionally from him and hated him to death.
and that's understandable, of course.
Yeah. So I think that that offense is the one that told me, fuck these guys.
Mhm,
I'm taking care of myself, not relying on them anymore.
mhm,
I was in second grade. The behavior in second grade changed, shifted big time. I got left back in second grade that year for truancy. I wasn't going to school anymore. And he was never around to reinforce it or take me to school. Nobody was ever taken to school in my home. And I wouldn't go. And my mom, doped up on her depression medication,
mhm,
didn't care if I went. I sat on my mom's love seat for the next 2 years watching soap operas with my mom. And my mom and I bonded. And it was dysfunctional how we did so and why we did so. But I bonded with my mom, and I was going to fucking kill that guy if he ever hurt her again. And
mhm.
he hurt her quite a bit. I laid on my mom. My mom used to lay on this love seat. And I don't know if you know what a love seat is.
Yeah.
It's probably only 70% the size of a standard size couch.
Right.
And my mom would lay on her right side
Mm-hmm.
in a fetal position, and I would lay in back of her, wrapped in her legs, my head on her left hip. And my mom would put her left hand down and rub my head gently, put her hands through it, her beautiful hands, and
Mm-hmm.
she would rub it, and she would rub it a little bit rough at times, and then soothe. It was meditation and medication to me as well, and I bonded with my mom. And it's important that I tell you this because it has so much to do with who I was, who I became, and how my mom's life uh, came about later on in years.
Right.
But I was emotionally and spiritually and physically. I don't think the umbilical cord was ever severed from my mother and I. And probably, ironically, my father had all to do with that
Mm-hmm.
because I went into a protected mode. And what's also significant in telling me this in the depth that I did is because addiction has a lot to do with codependency. And my mom and I developed a very codependent relationship inadvertently, unknowingly, unknowingly. And what started out as something that seemed beautiful and logical
Right.
wound up having this 8-year-old boy thinking that he was going to save my mom later on in years when she really got bad with her addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I suffered for all the years trying to help her,
Right.
thinking I was going to save her. And I couldn't. I felt horrible remorse and responsibility. But let me get back to the kid. Um, the next thing that happened at age 8, going on 9 now, was again, I was spending time at the welfare department. The family had dispersed. My brother Jim was gone in the Navy. My sister Barbara was gone, married a man 4 or 5 years older than her at age 16. My sister Kathy, who I was joined at the hip with, I loved her to death. She was like a friend. She was only 4 years older than me, but we bonded so beautifully. And when the other two older ones left, her and I bonded. My brother John, I never really was crazy about him. He was very self-centered, which a 10, 12, 13-year-old kid is. So
Right.
we never bonded, you know. But my sister Kathy and my sister Dorothy, who was only 2 years older than me, we had a bond. There was a nice triangle. And my two younger siblings, Chuck and Mary Ellen, um, they were like just cool kids to me, but no real big bond. I was too focused on my own survival at this point, you know. I didn't have the capacity to connect with them as my older sisters had with me because of all the dysfunction and all the violence.
Of course.
It kills the kid's spirit. The first thing that my parents did to me as a child, particularly my father, is they poisoned my spirit.
Right.
I didn't look at things with innocence anymore. At 8 years old now, I'm looking at things with fear, with doubt, with distrust. It wasn't natural anymore. I was protective of myself. I
Right.
wouldn't let anybody in. Nobody knew. After this guy, his name was Benedetto, I'll never forget it, the boy who sexually abused me, he shut me down big time. Took me years to trust men. And later on in my life, as we get into this, I'll give you more depth on that.
Mm-hmm.
How actually, ironically, men became a security blanket for me and a source of validation.
Right.
But at 8 or 9 years old now, uh, my father begins to get sick, and he's still gambling and drinking now. And it's gotten so bad now that we got evicted from Gravesend Projects. When you get evicted from projects, you're doing bad.
Right.
You're doing bad. And welfare was paying, but
Mm-hmm.
my dad was intercepting the welfare checks. Back then, we got a welfare check every 2 weeks. the 16th and the 1st of every month. And around the 11th or 12th, I would see my mom's energy rising because
Mm.
we're looking forward to getting the check.
Right.
And we used to get store credit from Molly's, and Tommy Franco's was a butcher shop that sold everything else. Because when you live by projects and you have a when you have a market by projects, you give everybody credit. And when they get their welfare checks, you go in, you give that guy your welfare check. He takes it, gives you back what you got coming after you pay your bill. And that was sustainable. That's what we relied on. But now the checks are disappearing. We're not paying our bills. We're not getting the food and the sustenance that we need. So we got evicted finally because of my father stealing the checks and gambling it and drinking it. So we move to different areas and different members of the family. Disbursement,
Mhm.
disbursement. Yeah, that's what happens when you have uh, six children that you're responsible for. And I went to live with cousins in Queens. Very disgraceful, very humiliating. And to leave a home where you're comfortable with siblings
Mm.
and join up. And my cousins, the Finnegans, they had 10 children, and probably 7 or 8 of them were living at home. I lived in a basement with them, horribly displaced, didn't fit in, didn't feel comfortable, couldn't go in their refrigerator, didn't feel comfortable
Of
in
course.
their bathrooms. Yeah. Uh, very difficult, emotionally traumatizing. So what happened to this boy, and this is in hindsight and the education I've gotten into, how how the ego mind kicks in at times to protect us, is I know I got to fend for myself. And I'm not going to share anything with anybody about how I feel, what I think. I'm just now reclusive. Uh, Thank God that God made me an extrovert because
Mm.
I couldn't help but be among others and somehow or another involve myself. And I happen to have had a very good sense of what was going on around me. I was very intuitive as a young boy.
Mm.
I knew how to get around. I knew how to get over. I learned how to lie, and I learned that lying could get me what I want. Girls liked me. Now I'm 9, 10, I'm out, I'm so the girls liked me. I was outgoing. I had a good personality, you know. I was curious and I was adventurous, really,
Right.
despite all this stuff. But that's the development of a child's personality.
Right.
Had I been a kid coming from a normal family, all of that creativity, all of that energy from within would have gone into playing an instrument at school or
Right.
you know becoming a scientist or becoming you know oceanography. I loved oceanography. You know, I had an interest in that. You know, when I was a very young boy, I loved watching things on Sunday night. That had to do with Mother Nature and history. And this is at 6, 7, 8 years old. I had interest in these things, but now I'm putting that interest and those ways in which my natural instincts were guiding me. They became ways to survive,
Right.
not to thrive, to survive. And that's what the ego mind does. And I learned how to lie, manipulate, and steal.
But that was your defense mechanism.
That's right. That's right. And those defense mechanisms uh, lead a child into a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what happens now is a year later, I'm 10 years old. Uh, my mom and dad finally get an apartment in Middle Village, Queens. And I went from projects in Middle Village, Queens to low income families. We moved to Middle Village, Queens, a middle income area. I come from the concrete jungle of projects. These are all private homes, bicycles in the driveways, basketball courts in the backyard, little, rows of little independent stores, pizza places, delicatessens, Jewish delicatessens, German delicatessens, all this private stuff, and I know I'm not fitting in here. We're on welfare. There's something very, very strange about. They might just as well have dropped me off in fucking Mississippi, man, because this was this was a totally strange place to be. Not a black face to be found, not a Hispanic face to be found, all vanilla white. And I knew I was a fish out of water in this neighborhood. But I know I have to fit in. And I'm 10 now. I'm 10 years old. And they put me in school. But because I got left back in second grade and I spent a year being dispersed to my cousin's house living there, a year had passed before we got back into the swing of things as being a family, quote family. Uh, they put me in PS 87, an elementary school. In Middle Village. And the first thing I realized is that uh, I'm claustrophobic. I can't sit in a class for 6, 7 hours. It ain't going to happen. Plus, at this particular time, my brother John was 17 or 18, and he had turned violent alcoholic. And he was coming home in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, blasting music, and him and my father starting riots, fights amongst themselves. Police were coming every night, every night. So
That's
now me and my sisters and my
Mhm.
two younger siblings, we're being woken up at night in the middle of the night. And the worst thing for a young child is being interrupted during their sleep at night and not being able to get back to sleep.
Mhm.
So my mom would try to send me off to school at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Mhm.
7:30 in the morning. It wasn't happening.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to go to school. I was ashamed to go to school. I was angry. I was frightened. Now I'm frightened of my brother's violence. I'm frightened of my father's. I'm living in an environment where it's not safe at all. And I don't like being there. So I'm taken to the streets now. Now I'd rather be at the park. School, I want nothing to do with. I was falling asleep in school, raising my hand every 20 minutes. I got to go to the bathroom. I got to go to the bathroom. Richard, you just went to the bathroom. I got to go to the bathroom again. And if they didn't let me go to the bathroom, I got up, I walked out. So within a very short period of time, a couple of months, I was seeing the psychiatrists or the social workers in school putting puzzles together
Mhm.
for them. We got evicted from the first apartment, moved to another area in Middle Village, to a little bit of a slum area
Mhm.
of Middle Village, Queens. And they're still trying to get me to go to school. And anytime I went to school, I got up and walked out. They would try to put me in the auditorium for, you know, uh, to punish me. I'd walk out of there too. Now they kicked me out of school. I'm 3, 4 months in. They kick me out of school and they get me private tutoring to come
Mhm.
home to my house. My mom and dad, they're trying to get me on the up and up. I'm smoking cigarettes now. I haven't yet drank or drugged. I'm just a little bit 10 going on 11. Um, they're sending a tutor to my home. She'd sit down, I'd sit down at the dining room table with her. My dad was sick at the time. He'd be somewhere. My mom would be cleaning the kitchen. I'd say, I got to go to the bathroom. I'd go to the bathroom. I'd fly out the window in the bathroom, not stay. And I did continue every day, every day that they sent the tutor. wouldn't sit through. I don't remember ever sitting through one full 2 hour period or whatever it was that she was supposed to sit with me. I wasn't going to do it. It wasn't happening. Nobody was going to discipline me, and I didn't want it. So I was running away from truant officers, and now my parents, because they stopped the tutoring, the school, I'm thrown out of the New York City Board of Education. I'm not allowed to go to school. And
Wow.
I'm brought in now because of it to family court. Now I'm going in front of a judge
Hmm.
for my behavior and no supervision at home.
Hmm.
So I'm going to court down in, I'll never forget it, 100, well, actually, it was Courthouse Square, not Courthouse Square. Oh, I can't think of it right now offhand. Um, I'm going to family court in Jamaica, and but I'm not showing up. I'm summoned there, but I'm not showing up. And I would show up once in a while. And the judge would warn me, if you don't show up, young man, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to be here, ba 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 ba.
Hmm.
And in between this now, I'm starting to run away from home. I don't want
Hmm.
to be at home anymore. My father's getting real sick. He had pancreatitis. My mother's getting worse with the pills. The whole house, everything is fragmenting. And I'm hitting the streets more than ever. I'm getting in trouble. I'm stealing. I was a I was a thief and a pathological liar. Everything and anything that wasn't nailed down, I was stealing. I was supporting myself. I was bringing home food for the house. I was never selfish with my money when I was stealing, smoking cigarettes and buying my own clothes. Every night I would have enough money to buy my mom. My mom used to love ice cream and halva bars, and
Hmm.
every night I made sure my mom had vanilla chocolate and strawberry ice cream, and or halva bars every night. I made sure that I had that for her, and I
Wow.
made sure that we had food in the house. I had I had more money than my parents did because of my stealing. I had stores in the neighborhood where I would go on certain days, and I learned ways in which to get into their cash registers or get into their merchandise. I was a pretty savvy thief for a young boy. Um, and I was ducking probation officers, running from police. I was always in trouble. Uh, and I had gotten caught robbing a house. This young boy, Robert Bucksbaum, I'll never forget it. Uh, they were bullying him in school, and I hated bullies. And
Hmm.
I wasn't a tough guy, you know.
Right.
I didn't start fights. I wasn't one of those kids going around beating people up, and I never bullied anyone. But I was tough enough to protect myself. And they
Hmm.
were bullying this kid, Robert, and I told Robert I'd help him. Robert used to sit next to me because the teacher kept me in the front of the class, and he used to sit next to me, and I'll never forget it. His nose used to run. He was a Jewish kid, an Orthodox Jewish kid, and his nose used to run, and he would sniff it. He would sniff, and I told him, "Oh man, blow your fucking nose, man," you know. I was a little bit tougher than he was, but I liked him. He was so vulnerable, and kids used to pick on him, and I protected him. Anybody up on that say, get the fuck away, leave him alone, mind your business, get out of here. And they
Hmm.
stopped bothering him, and he trusted me. And he took me to his house
Oh God.
one day because he wanted to introduce me to his family. And he showed me his sister's coin collection. He was proud of this coin collection she had.
Don't
Uh,
tell me you stole it.
I was never in school, well, no, not that much, and I, I knew how to break into homes. I was an expert at that time already,
Mm.
and I broke into his home and I started stealing little by little uh, coins and stuff from his sister's coin collection. And after quite a while, I took many, many coins. I was spending those coins in the neighborhood
Mm.
at face value. half dollars, silver dollars, quarters
Wow.
that were valuable. And when it was reported, they suspected it might have been me.
Mm.
And they went around to, I was a kid, stupid. They went around to the neighborhood merchants and asked if they saw me or if I was in there, giving them coins, half dollars, particularly silver dollars. And I got arrested for that. And that's when the courts really came down heavy on me.
Mm.
And I remember one morning in February, very, very cold morning. I was 11 years old. And uh, and my father used to take me when I did go. We used to take the bus to the court. And I went to court that morning, and I'll never forget it. I said to my father, who I very rarely talk to, uh, I said, "What's those green buses for, Dad?" And he said, "Don't worry about it. It's nothing to do with you." And my father didn't talk much to me. In fact, probably the conversation we're having here now lasted longer than all the years I knew my father. We never
Mm.
even talked that long. So I went into court that morning with him, and I got in front of this judge, and the judge looked at my records and he says, "Where have you been, son?" He said to me. I said, "I don't know, on the street." Blah, 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 blah,
Mhm.
blah. And he gave me a piece of his mind for not showing up. And he says, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you away for a little while." I thought it was a joke, you know. Uh, he said, "I'm going to send you to Spofford for 2 weeks." And it didn't
Register.
register right away.
Right.
But when they took me into custody, I I knew, uh-oh, the
Mm.
jig is up here. Something's going down.
Mhm.
And I wasn't ready for it. And I remember my father saying, "Your Honor, can we figure out a better way with this? He doesn't deserve to be put away." And my father's an ex-convict. He
Right.
knows what's
Right.
in store for me more than I know.
Mhm.
Uh, and he said, "No, Mr. Davis, your son's going." And he says, "And when he gets out, if he doesn't attend such and such school,
Oh.
he'll be going to Lincoln Hall until he's 18. We're not tolerating his behavior anymore." And let me tell you something. Again, in hindsight, that judge was a deterrent. That judge took me off the streets for that
Oh.
short while, and put me in a place where it has still, in fact, the dog that I'm getting on the 22nd of this month is named after the mentor that I met
Mm.
in 1965 as a result of this judge putting me away. So
Wow.
everything, and that's, if anything, I convey in this podcast
Right.
to whoever's listening, is
Mhm.
that everything that you go through, if you choose to, and you get to see the light, you'll see the meaning of every negative thing in your life, seemingly negative thing. I call them gifts wrapped in barbed wire. Well, that
Right.
judge gave me one of the greatest gifts and never made barbed wire look so good to me.
Mhm.
He put my ass away, and I was shifted and sent off to a place called Spofford. And that green bus that I asked my father about, and he said had nothing to do with me, I was on that bus shortly thereafter.
Were
And I
you scared?
remember, I'm sorry,
Were you scared?
I was terrified. I was terrified. But luckily, again, the ego mind and the
Mhm.
way in which God protects us with
Mhm.
our intuition, I didn't know how scared I was. And
Mhm.
I didn't know exactly what I was afraid of.
Right.
My father did that day give me some really comforting words. And I don't remember exactly what they were. But I think as we find in life when we get older, it's not the words we remember that count, it's the way they feel. that
That's
matters.
true.
And
That's
my
true.
father made me feel safer going away that day than I could ever have imagined feeling, given the circumstances.
Because
So,
he knew, of course, this was something that he was really good at.
and I think also, I think his father's intuition, more than his experience, I think he finally felt the compassion, not only for me, but for himself. I think he had got a moment of clarity where like, holy shit,
Yeah,
what the fuck have I created?
correct.
My son's going, he's 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My father knew intuitively that it should have been him going away, not
Correct.
me.
Yep.
As a father, I know that as a father. And I think he that day for the first time recognized that. And when I got on that bus, for a man who I hated from the deepest, darkest part of me that I hated
Mm-hmm.
with a vengeance, um, when I got on that bus, I looked at him and watched him until I couldn't see him anymore.
Oh my God.
Yes. And when I couldn't see him anymore, I remember very vividly turning to what was surrounding me. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a bunch of black kids who were actually, their behavior was such, you would have thought they were going to fucking Coney Island to an amusement park. Yeah. Because these kids, apparently a little bit older than me, Spofford back then went from anywhere my age to 18. These kids, these kids had been there before. Yes. They were from South Jamaica, black, a lot worse of an environment than I came from.
Mm-hmm.
But they were, I couldn't understand for the life of me how these kids were
It was normal for them,
just
and
normal. Yeah.
right.
I'm like, what the fuck, man? Right?
Mm.
And I remember going over the Triborough Bridge. I didn't know it was the Triborough Bridge then. I only learned the route of where we were. Um,
Mm.
uh, to the South Bronx, and it's the Triborough Bridge up to the Bruckner Expressway. And I remember going over that bridge and my face being pressed against the window
Mhm.
and looking out over the East River. I remember the aloneness that I felt and the fear that I felt about what was ahead of me. And I didn't know what was ahead of me. How does an 11-year-old boy imagine a juvenile correctional facility? I never even heard of the place. And at that time, Spofford was the most notorious juvenile correctional facility in the country for violence. Mm. So this so-called street kid um, learned more about the streets on that bus ride than he had ever learned all through his own experience
Right.
about how wild and crazy and vulnerable I really was. And
Wow.
fortunately, I had no problem at Spofford. I had no problem at Spofford at all with any of the other inmates. Nobody bothered me. There were kids my age, older, younger, and the correction officers were kind. They were fine. After a week in Spofford, uh, they decided that they wanted to send me to a minimum security facility
Mm.
called Zariga, which was on the more eastern part of the Bronx, underneath the White Stone Bridge. It's now called Zariga Industrial Park.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, it was it was a dormitory, three buildings. I remember pulling into the facility, and there were three buildings. One was administration, and the other two housed the young juvenile delinquents. And when I walked into Zariga, it was a whole different energy. They were dormitories, some 40 or 50, like barracks, like military barracks. And I felt something, I feel it in my stomach now. I felt something that was real off, man. It didn't feel safe. My instincts were telling me, whoa, man, this fucking place, this ain't, in Spofford, you you know, end your day or end your that period lunch or whatever you were eating, you'd go back to your room. It was a
Right.
cell, but it was more like a room with your cell partner, and you were safe. Uh, Zariga, you were never alone. You were surrounded by hostility, and the first thing that I encountered was racial comments from
Mm-mm.
five or six of a group. You know,
Right.
there was numbers now. Wasn't one person. There was numbers, and I felt very vulnerable. And I'm a white, skinny kid. I was the only white person. But there might have been one other white one in my
That's
dorm,
crazy.
and uh, and despite coming from projects and having a mix of the ethnicity, I felt the racial tension, uh, and I felt being outnumbered and being very vulnerable. And for 2 or 3 days, I took a big, big lashing of racial comments, shoves, pushes, guys asking me for my possessions. One of the things my father told me before coming, and he had visited me. My parents didn't visit me at Spofford, but they came the second day, I believe, at Zariga. And they brought me vanilla wafers, Vienna wafers, cookies, and I love Vienna wafers.
Mm.
And I had them, and I smoked at the time. Uh, I think my father gave me some of his cigarettes.
Mm.
He knew I smoked. Uh, and But the black kids wanted them. They wanted my possessions. And
Right.
my father warned me. He says, "You don't give anybody any of your possessions. You keep your mouth shut. You don't react. Just stay silent." That was the thing, a couple of the things my father told me when I
Right.
left court that day. And these black kids really intimidated me. And I defended the few possessions I had. And this is pretty much a devastating thing. And I probably won't say what happened, but I'll give you details. You can figure it out yourself. It's another place where I cry. Um, the third or fourth day, I believe it was the fourth day. The days were tough for me to count. They've dragged on because
Hmm.
I only had seven left to do. I was sent there on my eighth day, and one one afternoon, I walked into the bathroom and I had to take a pee.
Mm-mm.
And I walked in and I felt a bunch of them coming from different areas of the dorm come in after me, maybe 5 or 6 seconds after me. And before I can get to do what I wanted to do, they attacked me and they threw me into a stall. Uh, and there was nothing I can do.
Oh my God.
So um, when you have numbers, there was not one of them individually that I would have not
Yeah.
stood up for myself.
Right.
And this took me years to really come to grips with my masculinity, and
Hmm.
not my masculinity sexually,
Correct.
my masculinity as a man defending myself. Uh, it took me a lot of years to reconcile with myself that I couldn't defend myself. There's no way that a young boy at that age is going to defend. There's no way that a man is going to defend himself against numbers like that.
Of course.
So I took what I had coming to me, and and I had to eat a lot of humble pie for the next 2 or 3 days until 7 days came, and I was released from there. And that's something that, again, this is another thing that a young boy takes into his world of addiction. Young men and women don't go to a cooker filled with heroin, put it in a syringe, and inject it in their body because they feel good about themselves. This was just another act of shame that
To
led me
numb your pain and memory.
on the pain, unbeknownst to me.
But you didn't tell
Unbeknownst to me.
anything to anybody?
I never told that to anyone until I got sober and I met the right person, the right man to tell that to. When I got out of Zariga the first day, my family didn't want me back in their house or in the neighborhood, and I went to stay with my older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first day being at his house. He had just gotten married, and they were having a child. And I remember not being able to be in the house because of the shame. I didn't know it was the shame, but I had too much anxiety. It created too much stress on my nervous system. I was twitching. I was fidgety. I couldn't talk. I couldn't put sentences together the way I wanted to. I needed to smoke more cigarettes and more cigarettes. I needed to be out. I needed action. I needed fucking distraction.
Stimulant.
I needed distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And these are just symptoms, for whoever's listening to this podcast, be it themselves, or maybe they want to use this information watching their children grow.
Right.
Maybe they're addicts and their patterns are being handed down to their children inadvertently or forcefully. Uh, but I needed to be on the streets now. I needed action. I needed distraction. There was no way you were going to get me back to school. There was no way you were going to get me to do anything constructive. I was on a mission to take care of myself the only way I knew. And the only way I knew was on a destructive path. I wasn't going to get a job. I wasn't going to go to work. I didn't think. I knew I was going to be a thief. Those are resources that I developed. I was going to hit the streets and take care of myself. However, I had one, I had a dilemma. Uh, I had to go to this school, which was called Walter Reed, uh,
Mm.
on the borderline of Brooklyn and Queens and Maspeth. If I didn't go, I was going to be put away until I was 18. So I finally got back now into my parents' house after a week or so with my brother. And I get this bus pass
Mm-hmm.
in the mail from the family court system. And it says I am to report to Walter Reed, uh, 600 school, they called it back then. Um, and they gave me this bus pass.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting the bus pass and my parents getting me ready for school the first day. And I remember going to Metropolitan Avenue, standing on the bus stop. I had no idea what I was getting into. Uh, and I got on the bus, and the bus driver, this is very important because the timing is very significant. I got on the bus, and the driver looked very militant. He had a short Marine crew cut
Mm-hmm.
haircut, uh, very masculine, Irish looking guy. He looked at my bus pass and he said, "Get to the back of the bus, young man." Very hostile. And I said, "Get to the back. What the fuck does that mean?" Uh, and I was an expert at riding the bus and subway systems of New York City at that time. I did a lot of it, uh, except I used to sneak on.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to the back, and when I went to the back, it was all black kids, about 10 of them. And he told me very specifically that when I got to the back, it was beyond the back door, which is where
Right.
all the black kids were. And I realized later on that these black kids were going to the same school I was going to from South Jamaica. And between getting on that bus and going to the stop that we had to go to, and you had an option at that stop to either walk, which was about a half mile, maybe three-quarters of a mile, or take another bus.
Mm.
By the time I got off that bus, I was spit on, my seat kicked, cigarettes flicked at me, and called white cracker motherfucker, and we're going to bust you up, and all of their bullshit, racist comments came at me nonstop. And I remember specifically what was very intimidating about them was most of them had back then what they called beaver hats, these hats that they used to Vaseline down.
Mhm.
And I remember specifically looking at that. It's a cultural thing. I didn't identify with it. I didn't know what the fuck they were. I didn't even know what kind of hat it was. But they
Mhm.
were little caps, and they were greasing them down with Vaseline. Uh, but they beat the shit out of me emotionally. Like I said, flicked cigarettes at me, spit at me, talked about my family. I had just met these kids. That morning I got to school, I was disheveled. I was sweating. My nervous system was out of control, out of fucking control. But I had to report, or else I'd be up in Lincoln Hall till I was 18. And when I walked in, I was greeted by a tall white guy who reminded me a lot of my father,
Mm.
and his name was Mr. Lewis. And he immediately looked at me and said, "Welcome, young man. Are you okay?" I, I wasn't okay. He knew it, and he knew what I was subject to.
Right.
He was young, about maybe 26, not even maybe 23, 24. And he said, "Listen, man, you just stay by me." He says, "You're going to be in my class." I told
Mhm.
him my name and all. And that guy made me feel welcome. That guy made me feel protected while in school. Couldn't do nothing when I left, though. And for the next 4 months, on the way to school and on the way back, I took abuse from these guys on the bus. Once in a while, I get the shit kicked out of me. I always spit back at them. I always curse back at them. And I would never be able to change my seat because the bus drivers wouldn't let us. So I
But the bus
endured.
driver knew everything.
All of the bus drivers, yeah, along that whole line knew that the PS9 Walter Reed kids were in the back because we had to show our bus passes. Or you couldn't get on the bus. But they fucked up my nervous system big time. But I came back at them, man. I came back at them. I never used the word, the N word. I think I used it once in Coney Island because I heard my father use it. But I never used that word in defense of anything, you know, intentionally. But that word came to mind a lot. That's when I started using that word a lot because that's what they became. They became niggers to me on that bus.
Right.
They,
Because that's
they,
where they were, and just say it for what it is.
yeah. And by the way, the word nigger has nothing to do with color. John
Yeah, I
Lennon
know.
has a song called "Woman is the Nigger of the World." So I don't feel so bad saying that,
Yeah,
explaining the definition of it. Uh, but if those kids were white, their damage to me would have been just the same. But it was reverse discrimination, and they sadly learned the same behavior that white people learned, discriminating against them. But they did some damage to me. And for those 4 months, this Mr. Lewis cradled me every day, nurtured me every day, hugged me, embraced me.
wow.
Mr. Lewis came to my house, tried to talk to my parents, reinforced education, told them, "You have to get this boy back to education. You have to pay attention to him. You have to do homework with him. You have to put this boy back in a home life. He's got to go to high school. He needs to go to a vocational high school. He's not going to be a fucking rocket scientist. Doesn't have it in him. he needs to get a vocation. He needs to learn how to do something. And it fell on deaf ears.
Mm.
And one day in in May, a beautiful, beautiful spring day in May, I got on that bus. I was at the school for 4 months. I was February, March, April, May. I, 4 months. And I got on that bus that day. It was like any other day. I got on with them at Bohack Squares where we got on Metropolitan Avenue. Uh, and I went to the back with them. And I sat right across from the back entrance door. I used to try to sit as close to the door because it was the furthest I could get back from the bus
Mm-hmm.
before I was off limits. And the bus driver would literally say, "In the back, wise guy, in the back." So
Mm.
you couldn't go past that back exit door. And I remember sitting that day, I was sitting something like I'm sitting now, and I was facing the door. And the insults started coming, the spitting started coming, the flicking of cigarettes started coming. And I was crying. And the worst thing you could let them do was see you cry. I couldn't take it. My nervous system was shot. I was
Right.
fucking terrified. I couldn't take anymore. I literally couldn't take any more of the abuse. Yeah.
Right.
And I had gotten, remember it vividly, I had gotten about 2 stops away from where I got off. And believe me, I paid attention to everything back then. My OCD kicked in many different ways. I paid attention to everything around me. I had a sixth sense as
Mm-hmm.
to what was going on in me that normal kids don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that day that I was gonna fuck these guys up. I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna let loose on them like never before. And I timed it perfectly. I said, I'm gonna do it at this particular stop.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I get to my stop, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be done with what I was doing. And I timed it perfectly after more insults, more spitting at me. They used to spit at me. Fucking insane what I had to endure. But this day, I freaked out. I got up and I started calling them the N word.
Mm-hmm.
I started kicking, swinging, spitting, punching. I threw my books, everything. I went nuts on them for a good 15, 20 seconds, which felt like an eternity. And I remember all of them getting up back. There's on those New York City buses, there's like 5 seats in the back that go across, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's seats on the side. And they were all up, they were standing up in their seats, putting their legs up, fending me off. And I'm punching, kicking, I'm freaking out. They were more taken aback by my screaming and yelling and coming at them.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
probably didn't connect and hurt anybody at all, but I was insane enough to do so. And I went off, and my sixth sense knew when that bus was coming to my stop. And I knew that the bus driver, when he sensed and saw what was going on, he was going to pull over even quicker than usual.
Right.
And when it was all done, I ran off that bus. And when I got off that bus, it was a beautiful sunny day. I used to walk down 79th Street, and at 2:30, 3 o'clock, when I usually got off, the sun was directly over 79th Street, shining bright. It was a beautiful sight. And I used to love walking down, especially now it's spring, because I used to love tank tops. I used to love,
Mm-hmm.
short sleeve shirts, and I loved the sun on me. But this day I got off, and I remember keeling over and vomiting. I was vomiting right in the middle of the street. And this is the first time that I ever felt my shame as a young boy. I remember keeled over, my hands on my knees, puking, vomiting on the ground, all fluid.
Finally released all that
I
anxiety,
was
that
having a
anger.
cathartic, visceral experience.
Wow.
But what showed up that day, Marina? I was ashamed. I was frightened that people were looking at me. I was ashamed of breaking down and vomiting. I felt that people were gonna, must have thought I was disgusting. Look at this
Mm.
fucking, look at this disgraceful, kid in this neighborhood. I remember it vividly. Shame, feeling shame. And for a young boy or girl that age, the worst thing you can put on a young boy or girl that age is shame. Because shame ignites the ego more than any other trespass on that young boy or girl's life. At least for me, it is. And the people that I've dealt with and the people I work with, shame is always at the forefront of destructive behavior and addiction.
Wow.
So that day, this is really ironic. That day, I said, I'm never going back to that school. I don't give a fuck if they put me in Lincoln Hall until I'm 25.
Mm.
Not going back. And I knew that day intuitively is also that I'll run away. I'll go live somewhere else. I take care of myself. I don't need my parents. I wasn't afraid to sleep out at night. So I used to run away from home 2, 3 days at a time. Sleep on rooftops, sleep in basements, sleep in the park.
Mm.
I've slept in people's closets. So I was independent. I was going to take care of myself. But that day, I knew I wasn't going back. And this was what came through my mind too, is that day I had to give up Mr. Lewis, who I came to love. I loved looking forward to seeing him every day. I loved the attention that he paid to me.
Mm.
He would give me a few bucks to put in my pocket, make sure I had food money. He would give me anything I wanted. Pep talks. Pull me over the side. Keep coming back. You got to keep coming. You can't not come. You got to get an education. Talk to me like a father. The, my first mentor in my life, first father figure. I love my older brother Jim. He was my big brother. I loved him. I still love him today. He was my idol. But George Lewis, I didn't know his name at that point. Uh, his name was Mr. Lewis. That's all I know. But Mr. Lewis was the first father figure that I had in my life. And
Mm.
there's many other Mr. Lewises in my story, you know. Um, but probably this is the best. I don't think this is just going to be two segments because this to stop right here would probably be the best thing
Yeah.
because this is a transition
Me
from
too.
that boy turning into a man and a man with no direction, just living on his instincts, which got him into all the trouble in the world.
Sure.
Rich, that was I don't even have words. The most heartbreaking,
Mm,
painful story I've ever heard. And I've been interviewing kids
mhm,
that had like similar situations, but never like this because your situation wasn't because you chose it. It was because you had no other choice but to. And I really, really feel like I really hope that you have sued the system because what you're saying now is a testimony of how the system,
mhm,
once they removed you from the project, which is part of the system, because now you was able to be used in the system of the court.
mhm,
You know, they just removed your happy place because
mhm,
that was, I guess, the system of a welfare is no longer either present and or not as much. And now the system of the court and forcing you to go to, different schools, knowing what could have happened. And
mhm.
they know what happens over there.
Sure.
You know, I
Mhm,
mean, it's not, and you're the only little white kid. And the fact that you have experienced it before you was even 13 years old,
mhm, sure.
I can't even comprehend. Like, I genuinely just cannot. Like, I
Mhm.
think you're one of the strongest people I know, you know.
Well, The thing about it is, I was in that system until I was age 28.
Mm.
Uh, and of course, later on in different segments, I'll explain that. But, you know, Russ and I were talking about this before. Every, well, let me just tell you this. There was a circuit speaker in the 70s. His name was Bob Earl. You could Google him. Very interesting guy. He became a writer for the Perry Mason show, I just found out today. But Bob Earl used to, he was a circuit speaker, and he used to say things like, I come to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. And then he'd say something like, I've never had a miracle I didn't turn into a disaster, and I've never had a disaster I didn't turn into a miracle. However, with all of the adversity in my life, and this is something that's so imperative for an addict looking to get clean. It's imperative that he or she discover this. You can't just know it. You have to discover it. You have to produce it, from within you. Is that and you could read this in my book, every disaster in my life, every turning point that looked like I was going to get smothered by life and wind up dead, something arose that rose me up to get by and through it. Something happened, always. And in my book, I Was Not Born an Addict, I describe what and how those things manifested. I give you evidence of it. I don't write it to you, I show it to you in the book. This is what happened, exactly what happened. And those black kids on that bus, they were just a bunch of barbed wire, one of those gifts wrapped in barbed wire. I was able to write a book about being bullied because of those kids.
Right.
And you know what I do? I remember one of their names. His name was Andre Cooper. For whatever reason, I remember his name. I don't know, but I think God's going to somehow or another bump me into him one day,
Hmm.
60 years later.
I
Uh,
would love to see that.
all of those kids, every one of them, they had the same training I did, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. Probably even less fortunate than mine. But who knows? So I was able to have the endurance at the time to tolerate it. Um, I was able to have Mr. Lewis to be the buffer, to be the go-between, to be the say, hey, you got this, you can do this. Keep coming back, keep coming back. It's okay, you'll be fine. Go to school, get an education. Take care of yourself. Be good. Don't get in trouble. You're worth something, and that's what Mr. Lewis instilled in me. The value. And
God
very
bless him.
shortly after Mr. Lewis
Hmm.
came Joe Tezzerieri, and we'll talk about that another
Hmm.
time. That's this could be you know years ago I ran into another great friend who said, Rich, you can't tell your whole story in a book. You have to tell your story in a series.
Right.
You have so many segments of your story
Mhm.
that so many people will identify with.
Yeah.
And I never ever put my story out there with any particular place for it to go or any reason for it to be told, other than just it's my story.
Right.
And that's what it is. There's so many segments to my story.
Oh,
So
believe
many,
me, we're gonna be here.
yeah.
I don't mind doing it's
I think the thing that feels
mhm.
kind of like bittersweet in my way, and feeling how sad and sorry it is that a child would have to be forced to have to deal with life on their own at, even from 3.5 years old, we never think that we are faced with all of these situations.
Mhm.
Nobody was there to protect you. But
Mhm.
the feeling I have that's bittersweet to me is that I'm sitting with this person right now
Mhm.
that is 8 years, sober sobriety, that you're alive, you
Mhm.
know,
That's true.
and I
Mhm.
know the person that you are, and you're so giving of yourself,
Mhm.
and the blessing in itself is that I think you are saved for a purpose,
Yeah.
and it's really amazing that you've touched the people who you've already touched, and obviously you can't save everybody like you
Mhm.
wish that you could.
Mhm.
I could help as many people as I can, but when I'm singing for people, like, to me, music is my connection. When
Right.
when I go into nursing homes, I see what it does to people. I went yesterday to sing for Alzheimer's and dementia patients,
Mhm.
and when I'm there, they don't have Alzheimer's and
Right.
dementia.
That's right.
You're right.
That's right.
They're they're just people that are enjoying themselves. And that's the beauty of what you're doing, is you're showing the humility and having that human connection that people can still be saved. People, there is a future for you, and it could be
Right.
it could be a very enjoyable future. And it's, you've had a life that is trials and tribulations, and you've had great successes and peaks and valleys, and your life, it's good to stop. Like you said, here's a moment where you can stop, and
Mhm.
you're on a peak on a mountain. It's like walking through a forest. Hey, let's take a time out. Look around you. What do you see? Right now, you didn't mention anything yet about your getting involved in any of the situations that you are now getting ready to face and introduce us to.
What's
So
significant about what I just shared with you, and this is very important. It's very important to the listener. These, everything I've shared with you, if the addict or alcoholic is fortunate enough to find abstinence and then enter into recovery, because it is a totally different thing. Abstinence is not recovery. Abstinence is the inauguration of recovery. It's the introduction to recovery. Recovery is undoing everything that I just shared with you, getting through the emotional devastation, the trauma, the PTSD
Mhm.
of those circumstances and situations, the forgiveness of not only them, but for you.
Right.
That's the recovery. And if you don't go through, whether it's a 12-step program or whatever other way one might find to begin the process of recovery, if you don't go through that very humbling process, at best, your recovery will be, this is from the first step of my 12-step program. At best, if you don't go through those horribly humbling circumstances, at best, your recovery will be precarious, meaning you will be subject to possibly picking up a drug or a drink again. Me, I, and I don't say this with arrogance, but I've been healed to the point where the thought of a drink or a drug in my life doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't. I'm a arm's length away from a drink, don't get me wrong, but it's not in my psyche anymore. I don't know what it would take to ever make me pick up a drink or a drug again, but it's certainly not in my consciousness or in my subconsciousness. I've I've given it to my higher power, God, as I understand my God. It's not
Well,
mine to take back anymore. I can't. It was I was given a new birth certificate, and it's stamped, and it's not for me to redeem. You know, so it's a process. And this podcast perhaps will be something that might take you months to complete, Marina, to getting out to your public. I don't know.
I'm not, you know, I'm not going anywhere.
Hmm.
My goal, our goal, we're here for a reason,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And our goal has always been directly or indirectly to help someone else.
Mhm.
And this is like Russell said, when he sings, he heals because music is part of healing. And I know that you sing also. And that I
Mhm.
100% I will gladly say that you are one of the fortunate stories,
Yeah.
testimonies,
Mhm.
because you have so much heart, so much love, so much the questions that you've had in your little boy's mind. Why? Like where's the love? Like you analyzed. I feel like maybe you were probably one of the very few, if not probably the only child in your household who actually psychoanalyzed
Mhm.
without even realizing
Mhm.
as to why is it happening? Like, am I the only one? Because you see, when you were saying a story that you would buy ice cream for your mother,
Mhm.
even if you didn't actually buy, but whatever the case was, you
Mhm.
always came back and tried your best to look after your mom.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, the story was, of course, I'm not going to judge your siblings, not at all,
No.
but I feel like it was much harder for them to cope with their emotions because I feel like they were just so angry because maybe they didn't even realize how to analyze the
Mhm.
pain, the toxicity that destroyed their soul and their mind because it just came like a tsunami. Three and a
Yeah,
half years old is not, is
I think the time periods allowed each of us to process it in different ways.
correct.
I think I think my astrological sign. I think the relationship I have with my mom.
Mhm.
Uh, I I think I think it made me more sensitive. I think my older sister was indifferent to what was happening. I think my older sister despised my mom and she had issues with my mom. My brother Jim had personal issues with my dad. Uh, he was a little bit older. He made decisions. I, and I can't explain this away why, but I just think I'm the only one of my brothers who has my brother John died of alcoholism after 23 years of sobriety. I don't think he had the capacity to process emotionally and spiritually what he had went through. He was also a Vietnam vet who I attribute a lot of his drinking himself to death to. Uh, my brother Jim, my older brother Jim, still gambles and drinks at 82 years old. I have a younger brother who hasn't had a drink in over 40 years, but he's a compulsive gambler. He's very shady, very secretive. I love him to death, and I'm very protective of him. My sisters, I believe my one sister, Barbara, died from this disease also. My older sister, Kathy, is in total denial of who my father was. She thinks he was a great man, and I understand why.
Mhm.
Women have a whole different perspective on daddies. And my other two sisters, their opinions are very different than mine. And I afford them that luxury. It's good that they could see him in the light that they see him in. I don't see him in that light. Have I forgiven him? Absolutely. Am I at peace with him? I'll get into his
Mhm.
death, which is another touching segment
Right,
of this that can rip the heart out, but a very healing one. All of this leads to one thing: healing,
right.
healing. That's what it is, healing. My children, I thank God, my children will never, ever, ever know
Mm.
what I had to endure
Amen. Yeah.
emotionally and
Right,
spiritually. They
right.
hear a lot about my story. They know a lot about my story. very candid with my children about certain things. Uh, but they never have to experience my grandchildren. I have six grandchildren,
Oh,
and they know
Congratulations.
their grandpa. They know love. They know trust. And my children are great parents and great people. You know,
That's amazing. That's a blessing. And I feel like it's because you closed or worked really hard to close that cycle. That unfortunately, this is your family's. You could even say maybe karma.
but
Everybody comes
they
into,
have a great mom too. Thank God.
right. No, thank God. It's a blessing because of you, because you overcame it. And unfortunately, because of what your father has brought into the
Hmm.
family,
Right.
this was the gateway into the world that unfortunately we all wish the kids don't even see it on TV, let alone go through it,
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
and you have closed that cycle through
Hmm.
the worst things that anyone could ever go through.
Yep.
And honestly, if I could say God bless you, it's not going to be enough, because it's not easy. Words are not enough, but
Hmm.
I'm definitely going to hug you when I see you because just the first 10, 11 years of your life, it's crazy.
Hmm. Well, hey man, let's get this rolling into segment two.
Oh, we're definitely going to keep
Yeah,
doing it,
I'm ready whenever
twice a
you are.
week, whenever Russell is free. I want him to be here because, you know,
We have a lot of great energy going on between us, and we got this. This is perfect timing for the film, for the screenplay, for the book.
right?
Yeah, I didn't even tell you, Russ. I have another full featured screenplay called Damn Principles that you would love reading as well. So there's so much that we can
And
consolidate.
that's the beauty of what you're saying now. The beauty is that I hope that when people see the first part of the segment, is
Hmm.
that you not only have overcome, healed, you also gave love and compassion, and that your strength and wisdom went towards your family. You
You
have,
got to give it back. You got
and
to
now
give
you're
it back.
talking about so many other things that you're talking about that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like you can actually say there is a light. I guess if you don't give up, the light is there. Don't give up. That's amazing.
You
We do
never
have
get
a lot of projects, by the way, and I'm sure we're gonna talk about it later, but it's a beautiful thing.
well,
push
just
and push.
from all the things I can share that I got to know you over the last almost 2 years now,
Yeah.
since you I've
More
been
than
singing,
that. More than that.
since you and I've been singing together, and then for you to be as transparent and honest and open with your life, it only builds and gives me even more of a drive to make sure that I come through, for helping make this all come to fruition for
Hmm.
all of because
Mhm.
it's so meaningful. And just so you know, like I feel very, very strongly the way you have that strength to know that you will not ever even think of temptation of being able to, go back to what you've
Mhm.
experienced to open that door again. I feel the same way with life in general because I have to say I noticed that there's a lot of evil spirits and the
Yep.
demonology around, just a lot of different things that people bring to the table, and I feel really strongly to know that I'm proud to say that I'm uncorruptible. Like
Mhm.
I'm not willing to give in. If I see something that doesn't feel right or feel something, I don't care. Like, that just people that love you, they can try to introduce you because the devil works that way. If it can't get
Right.
to you, it get directly to the person closest to you, you
Mhm.
know?
You know, one of the things I think I said this to Marina today, the Buddhist, uh, the definition of enlightenment to the Buddhist is that you can never go back. You can't go back. I said that to Marina today, giving up this relationship with
Right.
this
Right.
unhealthy man, with
Mhm.
this sick man, not a bad man,
Right.
a very sick man. And I learned many, 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 many years ago and many different enlightenments, I could never go back. I could never go back to that old way of living. It would kill what's going to take me on to my next life.
Sure.
That's how I look at it. Uh,
And
and
you have support, the way you extended your support, you know, you have, as far as I'm concerned, you should know, and I'm showing you every day that our bond is going to be stronger and
uh,
stronger. How
we've
I
had a
feel.
bond from the beginning, you and I. And let me tell you something. Uh, if I regret, and I don't talk regret that much, but if I could go back in my childhood and do one thing, it would be to play an instrument.
Mm.
It's one of the only things that I feel like I missed out on. Uh, but I made up for it in musicology.
I'm singing.
You know, I was at the table tonight with a friend of Annie, this woman Renee, who I've seen there 3 or so times. We dance together, we sing together. She's a good woman, and she had another couple with them tonight, and they brought up the guy was doing Peter Frampton's "Baby I Love Your Way," the reggae style. And I said, just for kicks for them, I said, this song has an incredible history that goes all the way back to the mid 60s. And they looked at me like, I said, yeah. I said, the guy who wrote it is Peter Frampton. Peter Frampton came from a group called Humble Pie. He brought in the lead singer, Steve Marriott, who came from the group Small Faces from 1965, Itchy Park. Faces left, broke up. Rod Stewart became their lead singer, dropped the name Small Faces and made it Faces. Rod Stewart had just gotten back from debuting with Jeff Beck on The Truth Hour. So I gave him this whole lineage of this one song. They were mesmerized, you know? But that's what I did with music as a boy. I studied lyrics. When I used to open my albums up in the 60s, you used to get a poster and the history of the who wrote it, who produced it, who played on the band, the ba ba da ba ba da ba. And I collected all that data in this little thing called my brain, and I made it my hobby. So
Wow.
what I didn't learn instrumentally about music, I learned historically,
Wow.
and I put it up here. And
You know, read, and that's a good thing that you were able to read and write, and you
that's
know,
another thing I was blessed with. I never read a book.
yeah.
Read a book until I was 23 years old.
And now you wrote 2 books.
I've written 2 books. I've written three screenplays. I've written poems, and I've written a lot. I'm pretty much an avid reader, although I've been neglecting to do so because I've been working on writing so much the last 2 years.
Mm.
So I've been given a lot of things that people go to school and college for years, you know. My education just was never to be in a classroom. I hate being in a classroom. I have PTSD from school. I never got my GED. I could give two fucks about my GED. I don't need a fucking GED. Fuck that. Really, I mean it. And for years, I beat myself up. I felt like I felt ashamed. Fuck that. My education's not going to come from. I'm not even going to waste time taking a math test. Who gives a
For
shit about math at this age? You
for all
know.
the
Yeah.
children that are watching this right now, go get your GED.
I'm not against it, but it's not a priority. That type of education is no longer a priority in my life. No longer priority. Do I advocate of course kids going to college again? Absolutely, but it's not for everybody.
Right.
And for years I tortured myself thinking that it was my thing. I have PTSD in a classroom. My nervous system goes out of whack in a classroom. And let me tell you something. I took a course. I got college credits without a high school diploma. I took a course of English. Now, this is a kid who didn't know where to put a period or a comma.
Mm.
Right? I took a course at Nassau Community College, and they made me do a paper, an English paper. I got an A plus. I'm sorry, I got a B plus on the first paper I ever did for an English professor, and it was based on one of my favorite books called "The Things They Carried," about the infantry, what they had to carry in Vietnam. My brother was infantry in Vietnam. My father was in infantry under General Patton in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge. Yeah, so we'll get into that later on too about my father. My father came from a good family. My father came from a good family. Was one of
Wonderful.
6 children, privileged. No, 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 no deprivation there. You know,
So
but
how often do you feel comfortable about doing this type of podcast? How did you feel about talking about it in this manner,
it's
in
my
this way?
life, man. This is how I help people get sober and heal and say, "Well, I'm never." Of course, the people that I'm with, I reserve certain things. But with you guys in this capacity,
Mm.
I'm just very careful as to how I describe certain things, protection of my children, and
Of course.
you know, and not giving the wrong impression to people because I never want anybody to think that in any way, shape, or form anything I've done as a result of my addiction that it's okay, that it's acceptable. It's not. It's not acceptable, but it's
No, of
forgivable.
course.
It's forgivable and it's fixable. It's reparable. You know, um, there's amends that I had to make to people that I harmed that I could never make amends to. I'll never see them. There's one in particular I'll share it with you when it's time. But there's one in particular where I can never go back and make amends to that person. But I do that in my generosity and helping others to some extent as well. So I'm very cautious when I share with whom I share, and I know when to let it all go and when to pull
Sure.
back on it. You can't trust people with everything, and you can't trust everybody with some things. You know. So
Yeah.
anyway, man, I need to get to sleep. I got to be up at 5:30 to make a meeting in New York. I'm going to see the poet David White tomorrow at 10 o'clock in Manhattan. So I was given tickets from a kid I sponsor. So anyway,
Beautiful.
listen, I love you guys, man.
Rich, thank you so
Uh,
much. This was
Thank you,
very,
baby.
very
Yeah, man.
beautiful that
Get a
you
good
shared.
night's sleep and wake up tomorrow. It's a new dawn. Take some deep breaths, man. And you can get your mantra tomorrow is loving my solitude.
Absolutely. I know, I know, I know you're
And
helping
you,
me.
Russ, you're my brother, man. I love you. You're my spiritual brother.
Love you.
We've bonded from the very beginning. From the very beginning. Seriously.
We had a good vibe. We felt that there was,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
uh, we don't know sometimes why, but we trust our instincts,
Doesn't matter. Yeah. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And up till today, it's like this is only a continuation. See, just the way you paused, it's like now,
Mhm.
you've left us on a cliffhanger that we can't wait to hear the next
I
chapter.
know.
Oh, there's going to be many cliffhangers, brother. Believe me. Mhm. Believe me. All right,
Well,
guys. I love you. I'll
Rich,
talk to you tomorrow.
thank you, thank you. Take
stay
care.
healthy,
All right.
mentally, physically, emotionally, stay healthy. God bless you guys.
Namaste, my
Thank you.
friends.
Thank you.